Hi everyone, quick disclaimer here for our podcast. We just want to let everyone know that even though we are therapists, this podcast and the contents of our podcast do not serve as therapy and they are not a replacement for therapy.
Hello, welcome to Ahora Que podcast, as in sacamos la carrera, tuvimos los niños, y ahora qué. My name is Ana. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a mom of one, a 1-year-old actually. And I am Hispanic, born and raised in the U.S., but my parents are from Mexico. So with that, I'm also a first-generation Mexican-American and college graduate. And with me today, I have Emely.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm also a first-gen Mexican-American. I was born and raised in America, but my family is from Mexico. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a international board certified lactation consultant. I'm also a mom to 2 boys.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so a little bit about the title itself of this podcast. Y ahora que, I think it was my idea, but it kind of came from a space of like, okay, that's exactly how I feel when I transitioned into the job I'm doing. I worked in a corporate job. I left that job because I became a mom and I wanted to spend more time at home with my baby. And so it did very much a lot of the time and still does feel like, y ahora qué? Like, what am I doing? What am I supposed to be doing? I went through college. I got my degree. I got professional experience in the corporate world. I had the baby. And then it's like, it felt off, right? Because all I've ever known was like going to school and working. And now I'm spending more time at home. And so it's a little confusing. It's a little conflicting. And so thus was born Y ahora qué? Sacamos la carrera, tuvimos los niños. And I think we're still navigating that piece. We're still exploring it. We're still trying to figure out what we're doing. But it doesn't feel as constrained anymore, constricted. Like it now that I've been in it for a little bit, it feels a little bit more like, y ahora qué, like it doesn't have to end there. Y ahora qué, like there's so many other things we can keep doing and exploring and finding different, not only job opportunities, but like different ways to continue to grow as individuals and as moms.
Yeah, I think it's that like stuck feeling of like estás echándole ganas for all these years, right? And like that's ingrained in your head and suddenly things are slow and it's like, oh, I'm not really doing that anymore. So like, ahora qué? Like what follows, And it feels like if you're not, that quote, like echándole ganas at that level, that you're not doing it at all, almost. Like you've achieved the goals that everyone dreamed you would and that you dreamed you would. And then it always feels like you have to be setting more.
You have to keep going. And I guess like that's also what we've kind of learned through this, right? So me and Emily basically do the same thing and we fell into this in the same way. But like it doesn't feel anymore like, oh, we just stopped echándole ganas. Like, no, we're still going, we're still doing stuff. Seguimos echándole ganas, just it looks different now. It's not what I guess we thought it would look like when we were college freshmen.
Yeah. And I think part of it too came from like, so we know each other from working the same job, right? We met when we were both in those roles. And I think a big part of why we became friends and got close too was just like that lack of other people you can relate to in that job, right? Like not having other people, coworkers that shared that same like first gen experience and, like just can't relate to in the same way. And I think as we've been friends and like gone through other things and stuff, like finding those spaces, I think we have found them, right? And we've created some. This is one of them. But I think just like that shared experience of not always feeling like you fully fit in when you're not, part of the more common group of people and you're like first gen or even just like you came here from a different country. And I think like it's across the board, right? Professional, in school. Like I remember being in school here in Colorado and like the first day I was like, holy crap, like this is like all white people, like there was like barely any like people of color. And then especially like first gen or like Mexicans, Hispanic people, right? So like school, being at events sometimes I think feels that way, or even just like being in like mom and kid situations, right? Like events where you take your child to, and it's just like it doesn't feel exactly like you always fit in those spaces. And so I think this podcast was also born of like make a space where people can relate to the experiences that we're all kind of having and like sharing. And I'm sure other people feel this way and just maybe isn't always talked about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and that's exactly like being part of being a first gen. Like, we are most of the time not the majority. Like, we're almost always the minority in all those different spaces, professionally, being moms, in the different settings, and just like to your point, not having someone in your office that looks like you, that talks the same language as you, that eats the same food as you. Um, and so having to find ways to create these spaces for ourselves, because like you go to your job, right? But then you go home and it's like it's a completely different world. Like the food is different, the language is different, the people look different, and that's home. Like that's what we grew up in, and that's what we know. And so yeah, continuing to create those spaces in times and places where it doesn't feel like we have enough of that. So if you can relate to any of this, this is for you. This is for us. It's for all of us.
The food thing makes me laugh because I remember at that same job that we were at, I remember one day I think it was picadillo and I took like tostadas in crema y queso. Like I took everything, right, to have like the full like meal. And I was eating at my desk that day, right, because like also like I'm just eating and it's like this big meal. And I just remember like sitting there laughing, and I took a picture of it because I was like, I really just have this whole spread here, and it feels like a weird meal to take for lunch and like eat at a job almost, but it was like that's what I had ate for dinner, like those were my leftovers. And I like remember taking like sopa de fideo, like just different stuff like that just kind of felt a little bit like weird when it shouldn't, right? Because like you said, like that's the food you eat, and it feels different eating it at home than like eating it at your workplace.
Mm-hmm. Well, because everyone else is eating what, like their sandwich, their salad, and you have your whole spread over here. That yeah, like at home this is normal, this feels fine, and then at work it's like, oh, we didn't all pack picadillo for lunch, okay?
Yeah, you're like, oh, what's this? And then worries about that. And I think that's like, again, it goes back to even just like school and stuff. I still remember. I mean, thankfully I grew up in California and like the San Fernando Valley, right? So I think it felt less like that than it does here. And I think that's part of why like moving to Colorado really, like, it was a big culture shock, right? Not just like the differences with like snow and things like that, but just like I grew up where it felt like Mexicans and Hispanic and Latino people were the majority. And then I come to Colorado and I was like, wait, what? And so I think even just like going to school and having stuff like that, like I remember I did the same thing in grad school here in Colorado. I took like huevo con chile y jamón, and I had like my tortillas because that's how I eat it. It was like eating that for dinner there. It was dinner time.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so interesting to think about now that you said that, right? Like for you, it was a culture shock because of where you came from to live in Colorado, and I'm aware it's a very white state. But I was like born and raised here my whole life. And I think for me, it was like as I became an adult, as I started college, that's when I really had to fight for my identity as a Mexican, as a first gen person, because I guess growing up, I wasn't really as aware that this was something that you had to fight for, that you had to be. Like, I was aware that I wasn't white. I was aware that, like, at home we spoke Spanish and we ate Mexican food. But, like, it wasn't ever anything that, like, I realized, oh, there's such a huge difference between the two. And as I became an adult, it was like, wait, like, I want to make friends that speak the same language as me. I want to make friends that, like, eat the same foods as me. Mm-hmm. And that's where I feel like I say I had to fight because I had a lot of white friends growing up, and I had to find other people that I could relate to and that were like me. And I think as an adult is really where I was like, I guess I found this sense of like pride in being Mexican, in speaking two languages, and in being first gen. And that's something like I said, like growing up, I wasn't as aware of. Like I didn't know you had to try to be these things because this was normal for me. This is where I grew up.
Yeah. Well, and then you grew up in a small town too, so
Yeah, yeah. And even that within itself, like it was very white. And yes, there were Mexicans. It was a mountain town. The Mexicans work at the resorts, at the ski resorts and stuff. But you lack the culture. You lack a lot of it.
yeah.
And there was no taqueria in town. There was no Mexican grocery store in town. There's no bailes in town.
Yeah.
It was like when I moved to the city for college that I guess it was a little bit of a culture shock into my own culture of like, oh, you can just go to these things. You can just
Like
go eat
it's
tacos down the
available.
street. Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. It's so opposite because yeah, I feel like for me, like I think back to school and I'm like, yeah, like pretty much all the kids almost in the grade were in the like English learning, portion. Like that was just part of it. Like we were all doing that.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, it was just more like the majority, right? Like it felt like the majority, like I pretty much we only shopped at the Mexican grocery stores there and stuff. But then moving here, I remember like I think the first time I found one was kind of by accident. Like I happened to be driving by and I was like, wait, that's this mercado. And then I walked in and I was like, oh my God, they have like this stuff, they have this stuff. But it makes sense, like being in a small town and then coming here and being like, wait, like you said, you grew up and it was just normal that you were not the majority, right? That these things weren't available. And so then when you come here into like the city, it was like, wait, they are available. Like I can engage with my culture in this way and like be immersed in it
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
a way that you couldn't growing up in your mountain town, right? That's like
Yeah.
all small.
Yeah. Well, and even that, like, even in my mountain town, right? Like, I don't want to get too into this, but like, I remember in elementary school, in middle school, even a little bit in high school, the Mexican kids weren't necessarily my friends. Like they didn't really want to be my friends because I'm lighter skinned, right? Like I'm white appearing. It was very easy to make friends with the white girls. And then it didn't help that my mom put me in Girl Scouts in kindergarten and all the kids that were in Girl
Oh,
Scouts were white girls. So those were
yes.
my friends growing up. And I remember at one point somebody told me, I want to say this was in high school, a Mexican kid told me like, oh, I didn't even know you spoke Spanish. And it's like, yeah, like I'm Mexican just because you don't like want to be my friend and you don't want to talk to me, but I am Mexican. And that's kind of honestly like high school was a little bit more of where I made a couple Mexican friends because this one person was like, oh, she's like us, and then kind of brought me into the larger group.
Yeah.
But technically, I did grow up with like a lot of white friends and English speaking only. And so, like I said, I really had to fight for my identity as a Mexican American and trying to hold on to these pieces of me and my culture because for some reason, like in my brain, it wasn't okay to just like assimilate and just continue to be friends with the white people and continue to be more in those spaces and in that world. Like, no, it's something I've really wanted to like move away from as I became an adult and not like completely get rid of, but just open myself up to more opportunities where I'm surrounded to more people that are like me.
Yeah, and I think you add a different layer with that too of like how you said you're white appearing, right? Like you're lighter skin and so like you can pass, right? And I think that's also like another layer that's hard with like being first gen and like knowing some English and just like and layer for like think people overall, right? Like depending on how you look, like people have the idea of like, oh, if you look like this is you.
Hmm.
But just like yeah, to not have known that you spoke Spanish for all that time, and it was just like they also made assumptions on their end, right?
Hmm.
Like they made assumptions that like, oh, because she looks like this, because maybe we don't talk to her, like they kind of pushed you off, right?
Hmm.
Like they made their assumption of like, oh, she's not like us, so like let's push her away. And
Hmm.
then when they found out you were, it was like, oh, okay, no, like let's bring her in. And it's kind of
Hmm.
like, hey, had you just not made this like baseline assumption, like you guys probably would have been friends from before,
Yeah,
right?
from kindergarten, it would have been a completely different experience growing up had I been included in my own culture.
Right, exactly. Like maybe they would have like you would have been able to go to stuff that they knew about too, because I think that's another thing, right? Like, no, you don't see everything just daily driving around. Maybe now you do more, but like you don't know. Like there, somebody might be selling tacos from their house,
Oh
right? And they
no,
have
for
their stuff
sure.
there.
And I was very aware of stuff like that because I know like they would throw parties when I was in middle school, in high school, and I would hear about these parties. And it's funny because one of my best friends now was one of these people that used to throw these parties, and I wasn't invited to these parties. Like they throw Halloween parties and stuff like that, and it was all like the Mexican kids, and I didn't get invited because I wasn't part of their group. But I knew about it, and so I'm sure, to your point, there was more than just like parties. There were people selling food. There were people who had certain events, quinceañeras even, that I didn't go to
Yeah.
because I wasn't part of that group.
Right, and well, then you think about like, well, they probably knew people who made meals for those things or made like flan, like made different stuff like that. That was just like because you weren't invited, like you didn't make those connections, right? Like it's almost like networking, like you didn't
Hmm.
network in that way. And I think it really does still feel that way here. Like both of us being therapists and like, in Colorado, which is obviously dominantly white, right? I think a lot of times even in that space it feels like there aren't a lot of people of color, there aren't a lot of like Mexicans, Latino people doing that work. But then I think back to like when we had that BIPOC training for PSI, and I was like, it was just for BIPOC people, and like everyone that showed up, I was like, wait, like you're here in this space too. And then when we went to the
Exist.
Sombre Mesa too,
Oh yeah.
right? Like it was like, oh, they're all these like Hispanic Latino like clinicians that
Hmm.
we just don't know about because like you're around, but the paths don't cross, right? Or like
No,
depending on where you work, like you don't meet each other.
no. And I don't know if it's like, I mean, obviously we're not the majority. There are going to be more clinicians that are American, that are white, that speak solely English. And but then it's like we go to these spaces and we see a bunch of them and it's like, well, where have you been hiding? Like, where have we all been? Like, are we not marketing in the same way? Is it because our practices aren't as big as some of these other ones that are out there?
Hmm.
It's weird. It's a weird thing to think about that it's like, okay, we do all exist, and it's not like it's just five of us. No, there's quite a bit, but we're just
Yes.
not as out there in the world and in our community where we live in our state.
Well, and I think too, like, I'm like, the spaces, like, there aren't spaces for us to, like, get together either, right? Like, when I think about that, I'm just like, yeah, like, any kind of, like, BIPOC trainings, of course, right? Because they're so specific. And then, like, I only think of, like, Sombre Mesa, and I think there's that conference, right? But other than that, I'm like, there aren't really spaces that, like, where you'd gather. And I think in like spaces where it's not like, oh, this is a space for just like these people, right?
Mhm.
One, it's easier to miss each other, I
Mhm.
think, because it's like bigger groups and stuff.
Yeah.
And I also think like, I don't know, like sometimes you hear about those and you're like, oh yeah, but then you don't want to be the only people there, right? Like I think a lot of times we're like, we could go, but is it just gonna be us two and then like people we don't relate to at this
Mhm.
place? And so I think that's like it holds you off from going, and it maybe
Yeah.
does for other people too. Like then they
Yeah.
don't go.
Well, and then
Um,
we're very dependent on one another for things like that. Like if you're going, I'll
yes.
go, but if you're not going, it's like, okay, I'm not gonna go. I could have, but no, I'm not gonna go by myself.
And I think a lot of that is because then it's like, what if I go and I'm like one of the only people of color, or like one of the
Mhm.
only like Mexicans here, and now what? Like now I
Mhm.
have to like awkwardly network, and it's
Yeah.
like it's fine, like networking's beneficial anyway, but like you don't get that same level always.
Mhm.
Or I think about like how you said like the clinical supervision that you're starting to offer now too. And then it's like, yeah, that's good because again, like what kind like you don't usually get a clinical
Mhm.
supervisor for hours that also understands that added layer, right? And like even just like if you're in a workplace and you want to talk about like, hey, there's these things that feel weird, like it's harder to talk about microaggressions you might be experiencing with a supervisor or clinical supervisor that is not of your culture or like is just white, right? Because
Yeah.
there's like that like barrier,
Mhm. Mhm.
and like
And then
they
that
can
get,
be
I
like,
feel like these things also get a little, what's the word? It's not contradicting, but it creates these like conflicting feelings for people. Like when we create spaces like this, when we create, so like Emily was saying, like I want to get to a point where I can provide clinical supervision for other first gen Latinos, and people of color, right? It doesn't have to be just Latinos, but because of that reason, because there aren't enough supervisors that are persons of color. But then it's like when you make something unique, like specifically for these populations, then other people that don't fall under these groups of people get a little like, they don't love that. They're like, well, why does it have to be fully for this group of people? Like, why can't you make it more inclusive to everyone? And it's like, because there's already spaces for that. And
The world's already inclusive to you.
yes. Yeah. And just because you're including us in that doesn't mean we belong to that group. It doesn't mean we fit in here. And so it's not to make it like solely what is it, inclusive for this population, but it's like we don't have in many other spaces where we can just be us, where we can relate to somebody else who is like us.
And like feel comfortable to share too. Like I think that's another factor, right? Like sometimes like I don't really want to share about the things I've experienced in front of white people who I'm hoping will understand, but like might not. And like one, don't know if that's a safe person or a trustworthy person, right? And so like again, these spaces that are just, I think it is exclusive. Guys, this is that like we learned Spanish first. English is not my first language, so get me some slack. But I think it is like, it when it's like that, it just there's more safety in that, right? There's more sense of safety to like share and be open about things where like, okay, well, this person's gonna understand why things were like this for me growing up, right? Or why I feel this way because maybe they've experienced it the same way.
And on that, I think this is a perfect transition into our last little segment here of like things that we've experienced growing up as Latinos that like the general population might not fully understand.
Right.
Like, for example, you go to a party and it's like past midnight and you see these little kids just sleeping in between, laying out in the chairs que juntaron con una cobija, and the music is so loud. They're literally sitting right next to the speaker and they're just like asleep, deep asleep.
Sound asleep. Unbothered. The jacket is covering them. I always think about
all is well in the world.
There's that one. There's the like, I just saw a video of it yesterday and it always makes me laugh where it's just like, te va a llevar el señor. Or like, mira, esa señora te va a llevar. Like, if you keep misbehaving, te van a llevar. And then, then it's so cultural that like the señor or the señora will be like, sí, démelo, yo me lo llevo. And then they start like playing into it.
Yeah. And the kid is just like shaking his head, terrified looking at this person.
Yeah.
I also, there was one that like, this one is just ingrained in my brain that I just thought of. Anytime like, so I got sick a lot growing up, but my family's reasoning for it was always like, oh, you're not wearing socks or you're going outside without a jacket and like, this is why you're sick. And it's like, no, that's not why I'm getting sick. But then you believe it. They say it so much that you start to believe it. And then now as a mom with your own kid, you're like, no, pues lo tengo que tapar bien, que se ponga el gorro, que no le entre, que no le dé aire. Because he's going to get sick.
Yeah, that's going to cause it. Or like not wearing shoes inside. Like if you have hardwood floor and not having shoes or something like that. It's like, oh, like because of that, you're going to get sick.
It's always because you were walking on the floor without shoes or socks.
Shoes or socks on.
Not because you caught some virus.
No, it's the cold air that does it, or like the not drying your hair and going outside. Even if you just ran outside to throw something away or to do something really quick, and it's just like, nope, that's it. The illness entered you. I also like the Mexican dad whistle. I experienced this with my tios, but just like the like, I can't whistle, so I can't mimic it. We're gonna have to find someone who can and like
get and then we'll talk about it again.
Yeah, but that like whistle that just like signals like your tío is like looking for you, your dad is looking for you. And I think about it because I remember sitting at one of my son's like soccer practices, and I was sitting and like one of the dads there, he did that whistle and he was like behind me, and I like had to fight the urge to turn around because it like automatically was like, oh, someone's calling me. And I didn't turn, but then after I just started laughing, and I even told him, I was like, gosh, it just makes me like want to turn around. And he was just like, oh yeah, they're calling you. And he like even understood it, like he was like, yep. that one. Don't forget the cuando yo me muera. You know, every time the guilt tripping, the like, oh, pero cuando yo me muera,
Yeah.
me van a extrañar. You're gonna remember what I said.
Te vas a acordar de todo lo que hice por ti.
Yeah. And I don't think anyone can forget the chancla.
No.
Anyone can forget
That
the
one,
infamous
you don't
chancla.
even have, like, there's no more to be said there. Like, just the signaling of it. That's that. You get your act together.
I think about how with the chancla, your mother-in-law, like that's how she's got her dogs. So like the culture even goes down to the dogs, you know? Like she's just like, she just has to show them the shoe. And they're like,
They know. They know.
They
they have to get their act together, that they have to go take a bath, whatever it is that she's trying to get them to do.
So I think about that,
like of the chancla, which is funny
Even the
because
pets.
my dogs, we don't do that, right? We don't signal the chancla to them, but they know when she's here visiting us, they know that they need to listen to her, that they need to stop doing whatever they're doing.
Like abuela's here, she's got the chancla, she's ready to go. So yeah, I think just like this podcast, what to expect a little bit, right? Like just talking about these types of experiences and just like the specific ones we've experienced, and hoping to bring on some special guests that will talk about their experiences and bring up like some other stuff that we maybe aren't fully aware of. Might be a little educational too.
And then also just like, this is a Spanglish podcast, right? Like it's really hard for us to stick to one language or the other. But I think we're going to try and put some effort into like, if there's a specific topic that it makes more sense for it to be in Spanish, then we'll try to record it in Spanish. Or if there's a topic that we want to reach more of the English speaking population, then we'll make it solely in English. But I guess for the most part, this is a Spanglish podcast. So that's that.
Yeah, and there's no captions, so just gonna have to roll with it. If we do Spanish, just keeping in mind that we're bilingual, right? So sometimes we forget the words.
Sometimes we forget the words. Sometimes we say it or pronounce it wrong, both in Spanish and in English, because that's just what our brain does.
Yeah, we just gotta give us some slack.
But okay, if you listened this far, thanks for listening. Maybe we'll see you at the next one, and more to come.
Bye.